Right. A very warm and good afternoon to everyone present here. So I'd like to begin by thanking you for all your attendance. Thank you so much. What we are doing today, um, it is a research workshop. So before I begin, I would like each one of you to give me a brief introduction of yourself. What is your background? What is the purpose of you being here? Can we begin with Mr. Rahman?
My name is Abdul. I'm from a captain of marine industry. Currently, I'm doing MBA there, and this is my second semester. In this semester, I have a research activity. And last night in the group, I see the message from the Dr. Lee. Today is online research workshop is going on. So based on this message, I joined, and I see that one of the Jerusalem as well as Dr. Jacquelene, and she was my teacher earlier, and I love her very much. I love her teaching, so it was also my one of the goodness to participate.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Miss Yan? Thank you for coming. Miss Lee? Right. Thank you. Miss Elvie or Dr. Elvie. Welcome. Good. Thank you so much. And Mr. Andrew?
So, very similar to Miss Lee. So it's been quite a while before I joined research workshop. So I'm looking forward to this session to have a little bit of a refresher and recap of what research is about, and of course how it's the whole process going to be like. So I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you so much. Let's make this happen. Let's make the objective that you have in mind and what I want to relay happen. Now, to begin with, we must first of all understand what is research. Research is not an activity like you play mahjong or basketball or marbles. No, research is very serious. So, it is defined in any research textbook, it's defined as organized, systematic, critical, objective, scientific keyword investigation into what? A specific problem. And why you undertake this? Because you are soliciting for answers. You want answers. You need to find out why. And if possible, you would like to provide solutions. We have to ask ourselves, are we meeting this definition? Or we're doing a research paper because we are asked to do, or we have to do. So what do because I'm asked to do? But are we meeting this? Let's think about it for a while. Now, what do we mean by organized and systematic? Research must always be well planned. So, for example, why is this? We need to, for example, sorry, the slides are running too fast, but let's try to understand. First of all, we must have our thoughts organized. Why are we doing this research? What are our objectives? So, in doing so, we must plan our research. When we want to undertake, or who is going to be involved? Do we have the budget? What are the resources before we undertake the research? So, a simple example is first of all, we must have a theoretical framework. A theoretical framework is an existing framework that must guide your research. So, Upon identifying our theoretical framework, we have to then design our research. What is the type of research we intend to do? Secondly, we have to find a specific method. What methods will we be utilizing in obtaining answers? So we can't guess. We have to determine our research method based on our issue or research issue. Then research again is something we have to carry out, or an activity that must be carried out in a chronological order. So we can't skip. Meaning, before you can identify your research issue, you already know whether you have the budget or not. Without knowing what is the issue and how far or how serious the issue is, you can't determine the budget. So, research must follow chronological order. Now, again, what do we mean by being critical? If we are planning to be researchers, we must have a tendency to ask questions. We must be critical. Why is there such a problem? Or what is causing this problem to happen? Or where is this problem coming from? And how are we going to collect data? Or what kind of data is required? How do we make sure these research answers the questions? So some of the sample questions that you might want to raise when you're undertaking a research are these. Are we having the right research instruments? Have we developed the instrument correctly? Have we collected our data based on the sampling strategy that we have designed? We have to constantly raise these questions to ourselves before we implement the research project. So, as researchers, we must do tests to verify what we want to conclude. Tests would require a compilation of data that is a resultant of the research issue. Now, to go a little bit further, in the conceptual definition, it is stated that we have to be objective. What do we mean by being objective? We have to have a very clear mind. We cannot have our personal beliefs or norms influence what we think the problem may be. Right? So we have to be very objective, because if we are not objective, then we are having others interfere with the decisions that we need to make. And in conducting research, if you are the key researcher, you must be very objective about what you're going to find and how you're going to find it. So here, as you can see, as researchers, we cannot allow our personal beliefs and judgments interfere with decisions. So we have to be very firm, very firm about our decisions. And it again depends on the type of methodology we're using, whether quantitative or qualitative. That would depend on what are the instruments we're going to use, because when we use instruments, we are going to collect data. And these instruments must be developed accurately. I wouldn't even dare use the word correctly, but accuracy matters. Huh? Now, as we move on, now scientific research. Scientific research is also another type of research where it is the process of establishing knowledge through validated, verified, and reliable empirical data. Is it running by itself? Okay, so here, when we talk about validity, scientific research, for example, when there is a new drug that's supposed to be developed, these drugs are normally tested in the labs, and they use rats or mice. Why? They want to see to the efficacy of the drug before it's released for commercialization. So that is where scientific knowledge applies. So here I have given another example. Thermometer is valid instrument to measure body temperature. So validity is important in research. Then we have to verify our evidence or verify our proof, whether it's real, whether it's clear, whether it is what we have obtained, and make sure, most important, we maintain integrity. I mean, we cannot tell lies. I mean, you want to cover up example, if you were to step onto a weighing scale 5 times and it constantly displays the same body weight, then the weighing scale is reliable. This is something that we women tend to do, right? Sometimes. And when the weight, the number changes, sometimes it's either we glow or we go into glue, right? So this is an example of what we mean by reliability. So in research, reliability must be observed. Now, what is science? Science is a systematic study of anything that can be examined, tested, and verified. And in research, science is an element. That is why we have what we call scientific research or knowledge that's based on science so that we can make logical decisions so that our outcomes are logical. Why? Because scientific knowledge is always widely accepted and they are continuously challenged. Like for example, these days we have very advanced gadgets. The watches can measure whether we have body temperature or not today. But would you trust this watch? Or you would rather go to a doctor and the doctor says you have fever, you trust the doctor. Why you trust the doctor? Because it's validated. Because he's a doctor, she's a doctor. And then they will have a million certificates hanging around their consultation room. So when you see that, you're comforted. No, okay, what he says is right. But what the watch and what the doctor is going to tell you is the same. But you won't trust the watch. You trust the doctor. Validity. So these are all elements of research. Let's not forget. Then we have science. What is science? What are components of science? Science must be rational. Science cannot be skeptical. You cannot believe everything that you read or hear. And it's like that with research. You must be ready to go that extra mile to find out whether the data is true or valid. Matters, huh? You can't just believe what you see. You may have to travel to another location, another state to find the data so that you can prove that this is real, this is true, and then only you will have to prove to those who want to know what is the problem. Now, reasoning is how did you come out with your answers? But your answers will be based on your tests. How did you test your data? What data did you find? What software did you use? Who did you speak to? That's reasoning. Yeah? So, in understanding reasoning, there are two types of reasoning. We have inductive reasoning and we have deductive reasoning. Let us explore what are they. Inductive reasoning is a process of arriving at a conclusion based on a set of observations. So, meaning, when you observe, as soon as you have observed, you come out with your conclusion. So, an inductive reasoning is normally qualitative. It's qualitative. So, as soon as you have observed, you collect the details, and based on the evidences, you arrive at conclusions. Only then you develop a theory, and then you analyze from there, right? Now, to induce means to add up and make it into a theory. So it all begins by studying specific data, which then we will develop general explanation to account for the data. For example, I'll give you another example. Throughout my life, every crow I come across is black in color. Have you seen a crow in white color? So what would your assumption be? All crows are black in color. Understand? That is what we call inductive. And the power of inductive reasoning does not lie in its ability to prove, but it's valuable because we are given an opportunity or a liberty to form ideas. Inductive. That's why qualitative research can be so useful, can be so powerful if it's not abused in any way. Now we talk about deductive. Deduct means to reduce. To reduce is deductive. So when we are deducting, that means we are using a general theory to develop a hypothesis. So we raise hypothesis first and then we deduct from there. So it is a type of research which specific expectation is deduced from general theoretical premise and then tested with data that has been collected for their purpose. For example, we are studying exercise makes a woman happy. I'm not referring to men, study of women, because women tend to have emotions sometimes jumping up and down. Right. So let's say we decide to study if a woman exercises, she's much happy. So how do we go ahead with this? So we have to form hypothesis as a premise for us to test, to collect data, and assert that women are happy if they exercise. Remember, what is interesting about research and what I really like about research is that you can research any topic you want. There is no limitation. Oh, I must only study this. I will only study that. Or I only study this. No, it is all about being creative. But like I said, I would strictly say this: don't abuse anything in research, right? So to end this, a deductive researcher states her expectations in advance, and then you test those expectations which are formed as part of hypothesis. So this is a table that gives you an example of how deductive researchers use theory and hypothesis. You see, when we generalize, punishment will reduce the propensity to commit crime. The hypothesis is spouse abusers who are arrested and punished are less likely to repeat abuse. So a statement there, you form a hypothesis and this is what you will test. Understand? Huh? Test. Extrinsic rewards are rewards that will increase motivation at work. Very general because we don't know what is the reward, type of reward, we don't know. But we have to be very, very skewed. A rise in salary will not increase employee motivation. It's very skewed, very straightforward. Only hypotheses like this can be tested because you don't miss any of the variables and no generalization must happen. Now, falsification. Now, science advances by deductive falsification through a process of conjecture and refutation. Falsification is about having ideas. Sometimes we tend to think that all theories are scientific, but they are not. Sometimes we ourselves can formulate theories. Like, for example, all swans are white in color. Generalization. But are swans really white in color? All swans are in white color? Then you got to go and do your research. Maybe you have to sit by the lake or pond, and wait for the swans to come out. And I mean, it's like, for example, I'll give you other examples. Those National Geographic photographers. National Geographic photographers are paid a fortune for each photo. They earn 30,000 US dollars, 40,000 US dollars. Let's say they want to go and capture a photo of a gorilla coming out of its habitat. That gorilla won't come out today, tomorrow, probably only come out 7 days later. But these players will risk themselves to sit where they can see the gorilla, they wait for the gorilla to come out. 7 days, then they capture the image. Understand? That is also research. Do you understand? But it takes a lot of risk and time. Okay? So we cannot have it be false. So falsifiable does not mean false, but then it means the theory should be scientific and only if it is falsifiable, meaning there must be a principle to support what you are observing. Like for instance, I gave you the example just now and said exercise. The more a woman exercises, it keeps her happy. That's a theory. But what are you going to do to prove the theory? Even if you're going to write a paper to say that, you better have strong evidence. Cannot falsify. So again, all cross black would be falsified. If you're observing only one white crow, and you say all crows are black, then something is wrong. Yeah, right? Now we have two types of research. I'm sure most of you are familiar, quantitative and qualitative. If you're writing a research proposal, this must be included in chapter 3 under research design. Research design, you have to input why you're choosing a quantitative method or why you are choosing a qualitative method. Again, this is dependent on your research problem. What is the issue that you are investigating? So here, when you're looking at quantitative, the difference, research methodology involves epistemology of doing research and its influence. So, what are you studying and how the methods influence the data you're going to find? And each research method is available to researchers, is created and designed, you see, keywords, created and designed based on a distinguished belief of how truth and understanding can be established. So, the point is, it doesn't matter whether you're selecting quantitative or qualitative. The keywords that must be understood is truth and understanding must be established, right? Now, is there only one shared reality of each of us creates own reality, or can meaning and what we believe is real be independent from the researcher? Meaning, do we have the right to be independent with our findings? Answer is yes, because you are the main researcher, right? Now, this is a table that I've input for you to understand the difference between qualitative and quantitative. So, in studying qualitative method, to begin with, like I explained earlier, it is inductive. It must understand a social phenomenon. Social phenomena means what is the problem that you're studying? A topic on social science, right? Why do we have many teen girls getting pregnant today? Problem, isn't it? Girls below 18 becoming pregnant. Why? That's a social science topic. So we have to think, who are we going to collect data from? Is it going to be easy? How sensitive is this topic? How are you going to induct? How are you going to come up with your findings? Where are you going to collect data? So questions you have to raise. And it is a theoretical or grounded theory, meaning you will use a theory to or data to come out with your findings. For example, you want to find out, in a company, HR department wants to find out why the rate of absenteeism is very high. So what they do is, a researcher will walk into the HR department and what? Look for data on those employees who are absent. So from the data, they will come out with a theory to say it's because of these that employees are absent. That is what we call grounded theory. And the inquiry must be holistic, thorough. It must be context specific, means it must refer to a particular situation, no generalization. There must be observers as participants. That means you must observe, you must watch, you must see, and then come out with your own findings, and narrate, write down what you have found, right? Now, quantitative is deductive. It's based on hypothesis, theory, right? So it's very theory based. It focuses on what are your antecedents and dimensions. If you're measuring a certain variable, how are you measuring it? You must enter your variables. Then it can apply to anything. It doesn't have to be a specific context because you already have a hypothesis to test. And detached role of researcher. Researcher doesn't get too involved, but he must be very, very concerned about how he or she is going to collect data and test it. And how do you come out with your findings? We will use softwares, statistical softwares to analyze data, right? Now, characteristics of scientific research Number one, they must be purposive, meaning they must have a purpose. And they must have a research objective. So, when you are penning chapter 1, you are writing a background. As soon as you have written a background, you're going to pen your problem statement. What is a problem statement? It is the issue under investigation. So, for example, you want to see whether there is a relationship between listening to music and digestion. Listen to music and food digestion. Is there a relationship? Interesting, but how are we going to prove this? No, I don't think so. I mean, funny, yeah, that's research. So, you have to raise your objectives and questions so that it drives your research, it guides your research. Then rigor. How do you make sure you reduce errors? Ensure that your research process from the beginning follows the proper methodology. If you don't pen your problem statement correctly, then your research question is going to go wrong. Research objectively go wrong. Then when you are developing your instrument, you're certainly going to go wrong. So be very cautious. So that's what we mean by rigor. And if you sense that there is an error, be quick to eliminate the error so that you can continue with the research process effectively. Test. Research hypotheses can be tested. So your hypothesis that you formulate, make sure it's formulated sensibly. Don't draft a hypothesis that lacks sense, that lacks logic, that lacks direction, and you say you want to test. What do you think the results will be? Are you sure you can prove that that hypothesis is correct? Of course you can. So be very cautious. For example, sunsets are beautiful. This kind of thing. Don't ever generate this kind of hypothesis. Sunsets are beautiful. Sunset where? Sunset how? Sunset when? Correct? Fishes are happy when they are young. This is ridiculous. Don't. Be very careful. And say you, and then you have the cheek to say you want to test this kind of hypothesis. I mean, seriously, God help you, right? Now, as we continue, replicability. Don't replicate. Yeah? That means don't follow what others have done. The research topic may be similar, but the issue cannot be the same. So don't replicate your research study and make sure that you are precise. Precision means accuracy. If it's 68, it must be 68. Don't, it becomes 86 and you think it's correct. No. Research must be accurate. Where we will have problems with accuracy, it's during the testing. When we don't test correctly, when we don't formulate our hypothesis correctly, we don't carry out the correct tests, then we will not get or obtain precision. Confidence, if you know that that is the result, then defend it. Don't, when somebody comes and tells you, oh no, this cannot be, this is not true, and then you shake you. Cannot, huh? If that's the result, defend it. Why must you defend it? Because it's your study and your research. There have been circumstances when sometimes when I question the supervisors, all you have to do is just twist, just twist. And then they'll go blank. So shows what? Don't understand. Cannot. Don't adopt this. And be objective. Don't become emotional. Research is research. Don't start weeping and crying, over the results, oh no. Don't do all that. Objectivity must be bad. This is it means this is it. That's the way it is means that's the way it is. Because that's what the findings have proven, right? Now, Generalizability means don't generalize. Generalize means you say everything is the same. That's the way. No, you have to use your results obtained from the research to conclude whether it's general or not, right? And each scientific research must be designed to test a specific phenomenon with clear boundaries and limitations. And remember, what drives this would be your research objectives. When you formulate your research objectives, those research objectives must guide you in obtaining the specified result. So if you are saying to investigate, then you must investigate. If you are saying to analyze, then you must analyze. If you are saying to explore, then you must explore. You say explore, but you don't explore. What results are you going to obtain? Let's think about it. Huh? And what differentiates applied research and basic research is not the methods used, but the purpose. Purpose means what is the objective of doing the research. So applied research is you apply the method to solve a current problem, but it demands a solution. Like for instance, I gave you the example. Uh, why we have so many teen girls becoming pregnant today. The numbers are increasing every day. What could be causing this? And why? Where is the root cause? So that is you apply, right? Now basic is simply to generate a body of knowledge. So for example, if you're saying exercise is good, so you have to generate knowledge of what is exercise, why it's good, when one should exercise, whether to exercise more in the morning, to exercise more in the evening, which is good, and that is to generate a body of knowledge. So now there are, like I said earlier, there is no one best method for research. There are many methods that you could use, but it all depends on what is your purpose, what is your question that you need answers, and what are your objectives. So this is a little bit on experimental research. Experimental research is when you experiment to find out whether the results are clear and realistic. Now, quasi-experimental research is where you can use or integrate other research methods to an experimental research. So you want to incorporate a qualitative study to experimental research. You want to speak to a couple of people or few individuals to find out. You can integrate, no problem. Then we have observation. Observation is you don't do anything. You can just sit at the corner and just observe. This is a method that I find very interesting because you don't do anything, or perhaps you have a recorder, you can just record the information of authorities. Or you just sit and watch to gain your answers or findings. And of course, we have case study where we typically study a case, whether it's an organization, whether it's a person, whether it's a region, whether it's a product. Depends again on what is your objective. So that is it for this session. Any questions? Any questions? Don't know how to do research. Why am I researching? Oh, it's a waste of time. I have to test. Any questions? Yes.
Teacher, I have two parts. As a beginner in doing research, what is the first step that you need to do or to look into?
Okay, that's an excellent question, Rina. Thank you so much. If you are interested in research or you're planning to do a research, first of all, find out what exactly you want to research. What you want to research. So, what is the area of research? First. Secondly, area of research can be so broad, very broad. What is the area you want to research? For example, if you say you want to research human resource. Human resource is a very broad area. Agree? What area in human research are you planning to research? Are you researching the reward system? Are you researching equal employment opportunities? Are you you researching employee engagement? Are you researching employee motivation? That is a variable that you select. So it must interest you. Researcher is not something that somebody forces you to do. Cannot. You must love researching that particular area. Once you have decided, then you decide on your context. Organization, which organization? Why that organization? So you have gotten the variable, then you pick the next variable, or we call dependent variable, which will be shared by another trainer to get more knowledge on how to develop the framework. So you decide on that and then only see what is the problem in that area. So you got to read a little bit, probably understand where the problem is coming from, who's involved, has it got to do with the employee, has it got to do with the management. You got to extend your interest, then only start writing your research paper. Does that answer your question? Welcome. Any other questions? Mr. Rahman? No? Jan? No? Mr. Andrew? No? Okay, there are no research. We take a 10 minutes break, then we continue with the next module. Is that okay? Okay. Thank you so much. Yeah? Okay. Move this. Mm. You can also share attachment. Are we ready? Welcome back to the. What was it like? Have you refreshed? Yes, it happens. That means it's not supposed to be. If let's say, an example, you are trying to prove exercise is supposed to help increase happiness, but then when you test it, you got the other one. So that means the hypothesis is not significant. is good to assert what you're trying to do. You are trying to say exercise does. So it's good to assert that point. But like I said, we are using software. Softwares are still technology based. Let us also not forget now we are collecting data. The data we collect, we are entering the data also. So how we enter, what we enter again is a huge question mark. I mean, don't you all agree with me? That's why data entry is relevant. How you enter each number, or when you do your coding, got to be extra careful. If you have made a mistake somewhere along the line, then we do what we call data cleaning. You clean up before you enter the actual data. Or when you've collected your questionnaires, you've gotten a steady number of questionnaires returned. Go through. Go through to see if the answers are correct, relevant, purposeful to what you are studying. That is why it is so significant not to take pilot study for granted. Do the pilot study. Prepare the questionnaire. Get a set of experts. So somebody who knows what you're studying about. Release about 30 to 40 questionnaires. Have them go through. So they can see through your questionnaire whether you have penned the questions correctly, whether it is meeting the requirement of your study. Sometimes the questions can be formulated in exactly the same way but phrased differently. But it means the same. That again will affect your results. So must be very careful. So pilot study is essentially very good because it helps you reduce errors at the data collection stage. Yeah. Any other questions? Nitya? No? Okay, good. Now we continue. We are looking at literature review. We tend to repeat literature review, this is literature, I'm writing literature, this is my literature. End of the day, I don't know whether that's literature or not. Now, I've seen this, it happens. Then you do not define the term literature correctly. What is literature? And why we review literature? Let's look at that. So, definition-wise, the literature review is an evaluation of available documents on a topic which contains information, ideas, data, and evidence. It is not something you're going to find, but it's something that's already available. That's why they ask you to review the literature, right? So here, researchers go through available scholarly literary sources relevant to a particular issue or area of research to produce a description, summary, and critical evaluation of issue. So, example, if your area is about studying poor employee motivation, example, you have to source for journals that talk about poor employee motivation. You got to go and search for them. I mean, it just doesn't surface on your neck and say, here I am, journal on employee motivation. No, there's always that perception the journal must be there for me to find. No, you got to make an effort to find it. Got it? Now, a literature, I really like this slide. It hits me most of the time. So I read this slide repeatedly. Remember these. A literature review is not a description of what others have published, not a summary of published books. It's not merely a summary, it's more than that. Now, literature must be critical discussion showing insights, awareness of different arguments, theories, and research methods. So, therefore, when you are going through your literature, you also must be critical. That literature also must teach you to be critical, right? So, when you source for literature, we are looking at journals, publications, right? Academic articles. Now, these materials can be critical in nature, can be exploratory in nature. It can be a okay, I want to understand what is employee motivation. There will be journals that will teach you, help you understand what exactly employee motivation is, but it will be supported with the respective citations. Where are these citations coming from? These have been written by popular scholars in the respective areas, right? So, what is our role as a researcher? Number one, we have to be critical about the concepts that are defined. When we say critical, meaning you don't go and condemn, oh, this fellow, don't know what he's doing, who are we to do that? No. These people who wrote the papers are prolific industrialists, professors. You don't condemn. But you can ask questions. Hey, this concept right? Is it true? Is it appropriate? Is it relevant to what I'm writing? Is it contemporary? Or is it 50 years old? There are journals that were written 50 years ago. 50 years ago and today, lot has happened. Lot has changed. You have to think, does it apply to my writing? Does it apply to my research? Can I still use the theory? Can I still use the model? Is there an extension to that study? That's what we mean by being critical, right? And also be critical about the methods that were used. Method means the research method. If they used a qualitative method or a quantitative method, you can be critical. You can think, really, does this method work? Is it applicable? Or can I vary it? Maybe I can use a hybrid method. Why not? It's okay. But don't accept what you read as you read. Build a critical mindset. Now, similar to an entire research project, literature review requires us. What does literature require us to do? Number one, like I said earlier, and I stressed it time and forth, problem formulation. Problem formulation is what? In chapter 1, we are writing our problem statement. When we write our problem statement, make sure it sounds like a problem. I've read works in research where the problem statement sounds like a gossip article. No, I should say I am not annoyed, but they write it like it's a gossip. But he said, then he also said, and that one said, he said, yeah, everybody will say, but what's the problem? Be careful, because it doesn't lead you to identify the correct literature. Number one. Number two, literature search, make sure you select articles that are relevant and can be supportive in your research. Only then it will help you progress to the next step of developing your research instrument, data, solicitation of data, testing and all that. So where does all this begin? In the formulation of your problem. And make sure you are analyzing and interpreting the information correctly. Got it? Literature is very essential to research because it is the body of knowledge. What is literature? It's the body of knowledge that must support your study. So, literature is a composition of what? Models, theories, concepts, school of thoughts, frameworks. So, it is up to you to discern which is the most appropriate literature suitable to your study. Now, in formulating your problem statement, you must identify what is the purpose of your literature or what is the objective of finding for that particular literature. If you are soliciting for literature on employee engagement, why are you looking for literature on employee engagement? What is the purpose? Does it drive you to understand and perceive your problem statement? And we have to also assess the approach of the review, whether it's chronological, thematic, identify how broad it is, how many articles have been presented, where did the reading begin, where did the writing begin. You must sit and assess. In developing literature, no shortcut. It takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of energy. Yeah? Now, literature search involves what? It is all about learning and applying techniques of searching for sources. You can either solicit literature electronically. It means you can visit Google and certain repositories that provide you with very useful journals. Print, for example, SSRN, for example, Scientific Social Research Network. These are excellent repositories, and sometimes universities also provide their own repositories. We have our knowledge management center where you can visit and access a myriad of journals on the respective areas. So you can either own them electronically or print. That is up to you. But it must all be relevant to the issue that's being researched. Who are the authors? Who are the key authors? What citations do you require? What are the ideas? So you start looking for it, you start filing, you document, you reference, you start loading them into a repository. As soon as you think you've gotten what you need, then you find time to read. Don't download, continue downloading. Then it sits in a repository, abandoned and orphaned. No use, huh? No, I've seen this. I have, a lot of literature. I have this. I have that. Then I will ask my next question. So where is it? It's sitting somewhere, somewhere. Where's the somewhere? I don't know. So then why did you download it in the first place? You have to read. Nobody's asking you to, sweating blood. No. Oh, Dr. Jack, tomorrow going to ask. Today I burn the midnight lamp. Read. No. Have a cup of coffee, cup of tea, sit down and read. Why you get stressed? That's all you need to do as you pick up on the correct literature. Now, what are the stages? What are those steps leading towards identification of the right literature? Number one, evaluate whether the literature is relevant and useful. See whether what you have found is relevant and is useful to your study. Number one. Now, the relevance of the articles. How do you ensure the articles are relevant? It depends on what? Does it help improve the research question that's written? Here, again, I would say, ensure your research questions are penned correctly. Why am I saying correctly? Accurately. If the research questions lack accuracy, then when you are soliciting for literature, it will go A1. Got it done? Number one. Number two, does it help identify relevant theories for us to develop our theoretical framework? So you have to see, find, are there many theories laid out before you? If there are 10 theories, which is that one theory that's suitable to your study? And if you review, another tip is when you review your journals, if you see a certain theory appearing frequently in all those journals, that means if you are studying in the same area, you can select that theory. But do a brief analysis to check whether it is still the one that you're going to input as part of literature. Then we have, does it help identify our concepts and how to define? If you're opting for a quantitative method, you have to develop what we call a conceptual framework. Any idea what's a conceptual framework, Mr. Rahman? What is the conceptual framework? Any idea? No. See, a conceptual framework is a framework you conceptualize, you bring forth with basis to your study. That's why they call it conceptual framework. It is dependent on your study. So as you develop your title, you must already know what are your dependent variable or variables, what are your independent variables, Do you have a mediator or moderator incorporated? Upon identifying all these, only then you develop a conceptual framework. And don't forget, don't leave the variable sitting there. Often, you've got to build a relationship. That's what we mean by a conceptual framework and variable. Then, does it help us understand methods to do our research? So, does literature lead you to understand your research method? Whether you are selecting a quantitative method, a qualitative method, or a mixed method, does your literature guide you to understand that? And are you able to find gaps in the knowledge we are seeking? Anybody knows what is a gap? Gap. Gap is lubang. A gap is a hole, correct? In research, we call it clever. Let's say simple as that. A gap is a hole. When you do a study, you are going to cement that gap. What others have already done, what is it that have not been done and you're doing, is when you cement the gap, you seal the gap. So we call it research gap. But of course, we have other gaps: empirical gap, social gap, literature gap. We have methodological gap. So many gaps. Cultural gap, technology gap. It depends what exactly you're studying, and then only you input the research gap that you are trying to resolve. And does it help us support our rationale for doing the research? Like I said earlier, every research must have an must have an must have an problem. Good, sama. Purpose. Good, sama. Every research must be objective. Wow, very good. Well done. So I think you're getting there to understand what research is about. So, so it stages to literature review, analysis and interpretation. Now, analysis means as soon as you've collected data, you analyze what the data is saying, what the data is telling you. You don't collect data to build public relations, with everybody out there. Hey, I'm doing research, no. You collect the data, you go through, you make sure you get your answers. You analyze. Analysis is very deep, right? And then the analysis you interpret. Whatever you found, you interpret and come out with your results. Are we okay? Right? Now, at this stage, we have selected the articles we have to read. So here, you would have already selected whatever articles or literature that is relevant to your study. You review those articles to see whether it supports the gap, to see whether it supports your problem formulation. Then you discuss the findings and conclusions of pertinent literature. So, if your topic is similar to others who have done the same, you must reflect on their conclusions. What have they found? What are you going to find? Is there a similarity? Is there a distinction? Where is your difference? You have to study, yeah? Right? And decide which theory, concepts, and variables found in literature that you want to use in your research. Like I said, you can have 100 authors, but out of the 100, when you review, when you reflect, which is the theory that is suitable to your study? Only then you select that theory. It's a very long effort. It can take days and nights. Sometimes you have to read to understand one variable. You got to read 50 journals, and that's where most students who are doing research, they start reading blood, not even tears, blood. You know why? Reading 50 journals, going through, and then we prepare what we call a literature matrix. Literature matrix, sakit, no, sakit, painful, right? With Andrew, draw a table, then you got to identify the title, who's the author, the year. Then in them author, co-author, 3 authors, 4 authors, 5 authors, who are these pillars, who are these jokers who joined that pillar in writing that paper, then what is the title, what methodology was used, what was found, develop a literature metric. That is very tiring, exhausting to the mind. But it will help you end of the day. Because there has been substantial evidence in your area of study. So you don't have to worry that if tomorrow I have to find a model or a theory, you don't have to worry. Somebody has done the paper. You reflect on that paper. So then what you need to do is you choose a strategy to present thematic, chronological, or argumentative. You want to explore, you want to argue and say, no, I disagree. Fine. But make sure you have substantial evidence to support you. Or you're going to say, this is not the method. There are other methods. Also make sure you have evidence to support you and show skepticism in research findings. Skepticism means not to condemn, find that guts to no, I disagree. Are you prepared to disagree with other authors? Or they are the god of the paper. Find courage sometimes to read and no, I don't agree. I think this is not relevant. I think there are other methods. But don't say it without doing anything. I mean, say it and do some work to prove your argument. Understand? Then criticize weaknesses in work done by other researchers. If it's not right, or he's saying something that's absolutely in disagreement to what you think, you can be critical. But like I said, I will say it again and again and again, don't go and condemn. Someday somebody will be doing the same thing to your piece of work. Don't condemn. Be critical, it's okay. Critical means, for example, calculation of GDP is only this way, right? Economics, I think basically will know this. But are there any other ways of calculating GDP? That's being critical. You understand? You don't agree, you criticize, but you back it up. You have to support. Now, what literature review should contain? Number one, an overview of the topic or issue or theory to be studied and the objectives of the literature review. This one you will find in what we call the abstract. You read the abstract, it will give you a hint what it contains. Division of literary works being reviewed into categories. Chronology, meaning according to a period in history. Some journals are written, 50, the Maslow's hierarchy, 50 years old. That old man wrote 50 years ago. Sometimes I used to think, does it apply for today? Does it apply to today? Nobody will dare disagree. I will disagree because he says human beings cannot live alone. He says they must belong to a society, a community. Why? You have your Android phones today. I see them sitting in the train stations alone, going on, scrolling up, down. Only they cannot do this way and this way. Other than that, also they will do very soon. And then sitting in restaurants. I've done an observation research. I sit at the back like a kepochi, sometimes just to get information. Boyfriend, girlfriend, sitting opposite each other, and the headphone. She goes on and on and on, and the guy goes on. Nice to think. Why are you? They sit in your own house, in your room, and do FaceTime, finish. Why are you sitting in the restaurant and embarrassing the food, You know what I'm saying? And then when the food comes, what happens? I think most of you all do this. I don't do this. What do you do? Yes. Oh, I ate Jacquelene today. So what? The upload. Then you want 10 million people to know you ate Jacquelene. You know what I'm saying? So what I'm saying is, according to the theory, he says human beings cannot live alone. But today, I think they can, with the presence of the gadgets. Even children, what's the strategy to keep them quiet? children, young children from 2 to 4, 2 to 6, what's the strategy? I think Mr. Rahman also knows. Just the minute they sit at the dining table, they pull the chair, put the kid on the chair, they bring out the tablet, park, park. So the child, before, open the start. So the theory doesn't hold water today. It doesn't. Correct? It doesn't. So, are you ready to disagree? That's what we mean by being critical. Understand? Alright? So, chronological. In history, make comparison between periods in history. How is consumer behavior different long time ago and now? Consumer behavior, is it the same today? No. Today they use artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence, voice over. What bot is that? Chatbot. Chatbot, this bot, that bot all will make decisions today. So, you want to say it's the same? You dare to disagree? Right? Then thematic according to an idea. According to, for example, research on cosmetics from a religious ritual angle. Certain religions, they don't permit women to wear cosmetics. Agree, don't agree? Up to you. Understand that? Then argument for an example, arguments for against privacy or employment. So you see, what I'm trying to say is the literature gives you an avenue to openly argue, agree, criticize. But are you doing it with literature, or you get so stressed, or have to find the theory, tomorrow, supervisor will ask me, unplug something and then park it there, and then tomorrow show the supervisor this is what I have. Are you doing that? Let's ask ourselves, and explanation of how each work is similar to and how it varies from other research. So you have to do a comparative analysis between researcher to researcher. What is your viewpoint? Conclusions as to which writings are relevant in the arguments. Are they convincing? Do they contribute to the understanding and development of theory of research? It will depend on how you review your literature. Are we okay? Right? Any questions here? No? Now, the purpose of doing a literature, why are we required to develop literature review? Why? Number one, to define and limit the problem, to back up our research issue. Like I said, literature is the body of knowledge that must support your problem formulation. Secondly, evaluate definitions of significant concepts to clearly outline what is and what is not. So we have conceptual definitions. For example, what is consumer behavior? It's a conceptual definition. You will have multiple conceptual definitions of consumer behavior. Which one you want to select must be relevant to your study. Right? Then evaluate what other researchers agree or what is the scope. Whether other researchers agree, whether they think it should be included. Like I said, research is open. It will be entirely up to you. And to describe how our research fits into the context of existing literature. So make sure that your research is not a standalone. It must be integrated with the existing body of knowledge. It cannot be you saying something, the literature is saying something. How you integrate what you plan to say into the existing literature. That's what makes literature review powerful, right? And to describe how our research fits in the context of existing literature, what are the perceptions? Paradigm simply means what are the perceptions we are adopting? Neutral perception, critical perception, perception that's relatively new, will be up to you. What gaps in the literature? Like I said, what is it that you're planning to see? What are the studies that have been done that you are planning to answer that has not been done? And what research efforts within the research area are we trying to advance? So if you have done research, do you want to advance from here or you want to stay within the same realm of research? advice will always be make an effort to advance. Go beyond what has been said. Go beyond what has been researched. But it's not easy, but it is doable. Right? As we continue, avoid unnecessary duplication of what we are doing. I mean, don't be a person who copies the work. Don't copy, paste, copy what has been done. Find it in your DNA to come out and express and provide something that is relatively new. What are your new findings? What do you have to say? Um, I can share when I was writing my PhD thesis on corporate social responsibility. Um, Arguably, when I initially wrote my first draft to my professor in the university, there I was so excited, because it's an area I love to research. I started condemning CSR, from CSR is this, CSR is that, globally, they're killing people, they are stealing, resources, they are this, they are that. And I was so happy, that I did that kind of work. It gave me a certain sense of profound sense of fulfillment. No, send it to my supervisor. Guess what would have happened? He gave me a piece of his mind the next morning. What do you think you are doing? What do you think you are writing? I said, I wrote about CSR because this is what I want to do. Are you mad? Writing something like that, condemning what's going on around the world. I said, Jack, you cannot write like that. First step, huh? First step. He said, rewrite. Rewrite 10 pages about CSR. I had to put aside and rewrite. I said, write everything that is good, positive. Don't go and condemn. Why you do all this? I know you're very, enthusiastic, about that fella killing some people there. Some tribal people died in that, gas pipelines were running, and then seawater not clean. I know. Don't do all this. I had to rewrite, my fault, but that's how it works, huh? And that's what you shouldn't do. So avoid unnecessary duplication. Don't get too carried away. Sometimes you get emotional. Have you been in the position when you want to write? You hold a pen. You want to borrow over this pen. Cannot. Literature cannot. When you do a comparative analysis, you what this fella writing? Don't know what this fella reading. You don't know what he's doing. Don't do all that. When it comes to literature, you will have a variety of ideas, contribution. Absorb them, assess them, evaluate them, take it if you require it. Right? Now, on the other hand, we want to replicate the research done by others to see if it gives us the same result. That will be up to you. But whether it is a gap that you're answering or whether you just want to do a study, it's up to you. To evaluate promising research methods to see how these methods can be used, maybe are there existing reliable measurement instruments we can adopt? So, do you think you need to create new instruments or you can use existing instruments? Are there other techniques in other fields that can be adapted to suit our research? So, you are adopting a quantitative method, for example, but you desire to use a qualitative method. Make sure it can sync with your research. Make sure, right? And to identify what others have to say about research topic. What are the opinions and criticism of researchers and experts on the research we are doing? We have to take criticisms positively. We have to take expert opinions positively. Don't get too emotional. We can incorporate that as part of what? Critical review, literature review, or past studies. Who has done what, right? As supporting evidence. Now, other purpose is also to identify gaps in the research. What are those gaps that you are planning to answer or see? Gaps, huh? Is the existing theory being tested, producing conflicting results? That is why, in ascertaining your literature, make sure there are no conflicts between theory and theory. For example, what Herzberg says, what Maslow says are two different opinions. So you have to consider what they have to say before you want to contribute your own opinions. Then, why are there disagreements among experts, opposing views in the area? How can we find the solution? When writing literature, experts sometimes disagree. You know, right? If I'm good in my area and you're also an expert in the same area, we are not ready to even think. There's always a conflict in the views. But if you are in between the two, then try to exercise some consideration and how best you can blend their views into your paper. Then, how do you interpret the area of interest? What is your interpretation after reading? What is the justification or rationale that you want to do this research? There must always be a rationale for doing a research. Otherwise, research is a waste of time. What are you trying to find out? In some research projects, a lot of money is involved, budgets. Money is spent. End of the day, no results are secured. So it is important to identify the purpose of the research and identify literature evidence of the impact, implication of the phenomenon we are researching on. What are the evidences that have been found? What are arguments? Why the findings of our research? So whenever you draft your literature, be focused to make sure what you are contributing will be useful. That's why when you are developing literature, it takes a long time. You don't achieve the milestone in literature overnight. Yeah. Now, literature review gives us a clue to the direction of future research. How do we go from here? Where do we go from here? Questions asked. Is this enough? Do we have to do more? Right? And experts and past researchers may suggest unexplored issues in the research. I mean, sometimes certain researchers, they give you an idea. There are areas that you haven't researched. Look into those areas. Or past researchers may report on weaknesses in their research and suggest steps that others can carry out to improve research, of similar nature. We have something called limitations. Certain writers will input the limitations. That means there are those areas that they have not done. Perhaps it gives you an avenue to revisit those areas and maybe take them on and prove them, right? And to give us credibility as researchers, proving that we have read and understood enough of the topic to carry out the research. So essentially, in understanding literature, a lot of reading is required. You must read, you must assess, you must evaluate to see whether it is relevant to your study. Even if it is not relevant, it's good to read, to acquire those ideas. Now, like I said, read other literature review to get a sense of the type of things we might adopt. What is the twist? What is the approach? For example, identify different schools of thought that disagree with each other. Schools of thought would be John Hopkins Cancer Center, or we have hospitals. I'm looking at experimental research where school of thoughts are provoked by certain experts in the field of healthcare and medicine. So experts say, okay, somebody will say, okay, this illness is caused by this. Another expert will then dive in and say, no, there are other causes that can also affect. And those are what we call school of thoughts, right? Narrow down our topic. Remember that one characteristic of research is parsimony. That means not practical to read everything written. What is that one area that attracts your attention? Parsimony. To consider what we consider to be current, for example, articles written in 1975. Current or outdated? Outdated. Even then, I will still see literature written in 1960, 1950. But what is the relevance to today? Is it still the same? Is the business landscape the same? Are organizations still the same? Are employees with the same mindset? What has changed? What has grown? What has expanded? We have to assess before we input. But however, there is a guru that has written the theory in that year, if you don't have a choice, then you input that theory. But first of all, assess if there has been an extension to that study, right? Like for instance, stakeholder theory, for example. Familiar with stakeholder theory? I like Dr. Aruna. She just goes up. Stakeholder theory.
I'm not really familiar with that theory.
It's okay. It's okay. We all learning together. Not to worry. See, a stakeholder theory is a theory that says every individual, every body, or every organization is affected and will affect or the policies, procedures, or actions in a company. So the theory says every stakeholder affects and is affected. So example of stakeholders will be consumers, employees, manufacturers, exactly. But the impact will differ. Consumer employees different, but they're still stakeholders. That is the old understanding. Until today it stands. But there is a new addition. No? They said the environment is also a stakeholder. Do you agree? Why you agree? Very good.
I agree because especially during our COVID-19 pandemic, so this is actually proven that climates or the situations actually impact how to say it, operation you've been through, or even our normal life routine is impacted due to that. So
Good. See, well done. You don't have to read tons of literature to prove this. You got to think out of the box. What we have done to the environment, so much harm we have done in the way we dispose, in the way we litter, in the way we package, in the way we label, so much damage. Today, Mother Earth, she's giving it back to us, blowing four folds. Now when that flood's coming your way, now storms are coming your way. Who have we thought? But it's a new extension. No, they say environment is a stakeholder with the degree of damage that's happening in the environment, like what Dr. Adina said, climate change, severe, today very severe. So it is an addition to the theory of stakeholder. Now we know that we have to source for write-ups that make such claims. An example. Now, how do you catalog and document the literature that you have read? So you have to devise a system of when you reference and you write summaries or comments or what. I mean, you can prepare a repository on your own. You mentioned the literature, what was said, what was the outcome, who wrote it, is it relatively new, is it contemporary? So you write down and see whether there are other authors that agree or disagree. That's a method. Adopt a cataloging system, systematically put similar files. So if there is one topic, you merge those topics in that area, put them in a folder so you are in control of what you are soliciting and acquiring. Name the files you save in a way you easily remember what they are. So it's some effort, but it's very helpful. So you're in control of what you are cataloging and compiling. Now, this is the format of how you write a literature review. So number one, you must have an introduction to the topic. Define the general topic. So write it from a general perspective first, an issue or what is the area of concern. Describe overall trend of what is published in this area. What is being published? What is being said? What is the general trend? Establish our reason. Why are we doing this review of literature? Then you put your research studies into the respective areas or topics or themes. Then this takes some effort. Writing a summary, synthesize means you merge. You want to criticize, it's up to you. You categorize the important arguments and ideas. Then you have to see what are the differences in perceptions, views, arguments. Then you raise the gaps in theories and concepts. Like for instance, talking about Maslow's theory, 1970s and today. There is a gap. Why are you going to be using that? And then you have to highlight the weaknesses in research methods used, summarize major contributions of significant studies. Were there contributions made? If there were, where and why? And how important were these contributions? And then you evaluate the body of knowledge, pointing out the gaps, flaws. If there were gaps, what were the gaps? If there were flaws, if there were mistakes, what were the mistakes? And what were the inconsistencies? Whether there was inconsistency, where was it? What was done? What was not done? And what you can do to seal that gap? And what can be done for future studies, right? And learn how to catalog and document the literature that you have read. Make sure you devise a system of referencing and writing. This is relevant. Build a system to input your catalog of journals or publications. What are the topics, who wrote it, why they wrote it, essentially so that you are guided to continue. And then put in common files, name the files so that you can always revisit them. Learn how to catalog and document the literature you have read. Adopt a cataloging system, systematically put similar. I believe you can do this. Is this too difficult? Takes a bit of effort, but I think can be done, right? Now, identify seminal papers. What are those papers that you find relatively influential or useful? See, for every topic, there will be a key author. There is somebody who is prominent in that area. Capture all his papers and read and review. And find the gaps, the relative points that the writer is planning to raise. Then you sit down and evaluate whether the paper is worth reading, whether the paper is useful. So to start with, make it a point to read the abstract. You know what's an abstract? An abstract is a brief synopsis. It's like before you go and watch a movie, they have what we call trailers. Before you watch the movie, you want to know what the movie is all about. Because you don't want your ticket money, to be wasted. You understand what I'm saying? Right? So that's what we mean by abstract. Then learn how to evaluate literature, decide whether it's worth reading, whether it's useful, and then only table the contents and chapters. Then, so these are methods that we use for citations. How you input your citations and your referencing. In literature, I must stress this. When you are developing literature, it is so significant that you input your citations and references. You can't write anything blankly. You can't write anything blatantly. You cannot. Because this is somebody else's work. And you can't write it as your own work. You have to pen it and you have to input the citations. But what you can do as part of developing literature is you can paraphrase. Make sure you paraphrase. Don't copy exactly what has been written. That is breaching, or that is breaching the academic policy. So be very cautious. So these are some methods as to how, which I believe you are all very familiar. This is very brief, very familiar. So that's it. Any questions for me? Yes.
I actually wanted to ask this question from the very beginning when you say how painful is literature methods. So students being students, when we produce these literature review methods, what are we supposed to do with it if there is a empty column?
Which
Let's say in metrics of the article that is not mentioned. Let's say, for example, limitations, recommendations, or to some extent, perhaps the research method is not really clearly
Um, like I said, not all journals are thorough. You can make a note that one column that the research method lacks clarity. Why it lacks clarity? You got to read and revisit that journal. Maybe the author himself is not sure. It could be a paper just merely exploring the subject matter, for example, helping you understand what is employee engagement. It's something that we call systematic literature review, where they help you understand. No methodology is involved. Could be also that. Or sometimes, like I said, not all authors are also brilliant. I'm not condemning anybody, right? But you got to make a note that the methodology is not clear, or the methodology lacks suitability to the study. So you get a little bit critical and you input your own notes. Open up a column, input your own notes. It's okay, no problem. Like I said, they are not perfect.
Because usually, supervisor will ask, right? And when as a student show it to the supervisor, sometimes do not want to give the impressions that students didn't do the work well, or purposefully did not complete the work, the column is empty or left empty. So tends to replace that with another journal article. Or should I just leave it there, or replace it with a new one?
So you see, relatively, some of these journals are very useful. Although they lack clarity and direction, some are very useful in terms of context, in terms of identifying the theory in the paper, very useful. However, there is some error where they did not denote the methodology correctly. So you make a comment there. The method has not been identified correctly. So maybe you can recommend another method. It will be up to you. But the supervisors have a responsibility to be very vocal and to be very sensitive to these little gaps. Supervisor cannot just view, shake head, okay, cannot. Supervisor relatively must take full, I wouldn't even dare use the word responsibility, must take full accountability over the matrix. So if there is a gap, ask the supervisor, why this is vacant? What happened? Why have you left it vacant? Why this happens to be written in this format? Are you unsure? Did you not find? Then you get responses. Hope that answers your questions. Welcome. Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Andrew.
Addressing the literature gap or research gap, as a student, sometimes the question that maybe some of us will always have is how much is enough? In other words, like when we are going through the process, as what was mentioned, in our initial interpretation, the gap is as such. So there is an area or perhaps a method that was not fully explored. Then eventually, when we conclude that, all right, this will be my gap, this will be my, how would I structure my literature review, then maybe like a few more articles later, then the gap is not there anymore because some other articles is covered. So how much actually is enough, perhaps, for us to come to that perhaps initial conclusion that this would be my gap?
It's also, thank you for the question. It depends on how deep is the gap, how far. You see, gaps, they can be interrelated to other gaps. Example, an employee or employees do not lack motivation because they are not motivated. There must be reasons that have caused them to be demotivated. So, where is that gap coming from? Why are they demotivated? So, it's the gap, it's not a standalone. It can be something that is linked. So, what is it that you want to uncover? So, there is no this is enough or that is enough. One gap will lead you to identifying the next gap. But what is the gap you want to resolve? That much is required will be entirely up to the researcher. How much you want to prove, how much you want to input. But let me add, those gaps must be relevant to your study. You input technological gap, cultural gap, empirical gap, literature gap, social gap. For what? For what? Is it pertinent to your study? Does it add value to your study? Does it increase value of your study? No point. You have wasted time writing without recognizing what exactly is the gap of your study. So it is important to understand where your gap is coming from. That is why past papers are essential. You got to read past papers in the same area to see whether the gaps have not been explored or they have stopped somewhere. Then you got to take it up and then you got to uncover them. Maybe. Then that gap, where are you going to go from here? Are you solving it? Or there are going to be further angles that must be answered. And you must include in your limitations to say this is so much that could be done. This ought to be reflected, ought to be investigated, ought to be analyzed further from here. Does that answer your question? So gap is not merely a hole, no. You got to be very, very strong about it. How you're going to resolve the gap? What can be done? What has been done in the past? What is it at the moment? Sometimes they have no answer to the gaps. But don't know what to do. So you have to be also careful not to. I mean, you want to be a Marvel Comics hero and I want to answer. Write the paper. End of the day, that study doesn't lead anybody to understand what you're writing. Oh, what? Why did you take it up? So it all boils back to how much you have read and researched. Okay? Any other questions for me? Mr. Rahman? No? Can I understand? Yeah. Are you okay with your literature review? A lot of things missing.
Joking.
So make it a practice then to constantly read, visit, amplify your understanding, your comprehension on the various topics. Even if it's got nothing to do with you, don't fold everything, put one side. I have nothing to do. No, take it up and read. Read. It may be knowledge. It may be something you can share or tell. Read. Don't stop. Son, I don't know. I have nothing to do with this. I hold and keep one side. Or give to, recycling. Don't do that, huh? Read, revisit. You never know when it will be useful for your knowledge repository. So, no other questions? If there are no further questions, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. It's been a pleasure to have shared so much with each one of you. Thank you so much. We'll take a short break, 10 minutes break for our next session. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Henry. So much. Thank you so much. Are they supposed to do this on the spot? Yes. Mm. Kasih kedai datang. Is itu. Thank you. Okay, before welcome back. Huh? I want to take just a few moments to appeal to you to give me your evaluation. Um, Mr. Andrew will flash the QR code. where you tell me what was good, whether you're happy, whether you're very happy, whether you're not so happy. So thank you, Mr. Andrew. We may have to scan that and fill in the form with the respective questions. Can we take a quick minute? Boleh. Dan scan ya. Right. So if it's completed, I want to thank you so much. Thank you so very much for joining me in my session this afternoon. It's been a pleasure having to share so much about research to awaken you to the loopholes and to the benefits of research. So I urge you to keep it going. If there are more trainings that would happen, join them, learn them, and become the researcher the best you can. So until I see you again, thank you so much.